Hey guys, so if anyone's unfamiliar with the format, like some new people usually come in, so just confirm that you can see the screens and the audio isn't sort of doubled up or anything like that. Cool. So for new people, definitely make use of your time here. So every month we go through works in progress, and you can post that just publicly on the works in progress forums. I usually take them from the purple names here, and it's nice because it's mixed in with everyone else, so you can get feedback from others, but then also from these private sessions. So there's instructions. I'll link them in any video that I post on how to connect Discords to YouTube. The only thing is it takes a little bit of time to, especially if you're going from one, say from like the observer to the progressor, might take some time to update. So these are really good opportunities. They held them every month. And then before that, we sort of like introduce a new topic and then also have a little bit of a workshop. So there's loads of like little bits to progress in your characters. So today I've taken some extracts from the ones that I could see most currently updated, and I've put them into a Photoshop. So before I get into that, is there anything pressing that people want to go through in terms of feedback, or maybe they've updated some of their screenshots and they can tell me now and I'll just like extract those? Oh, this one. Okay, cool. Yeah, we can do both those. It's lucky that hair cards popped up on this one. It's nice that you've done it, redone it. It looks better from this distance, but we can go into more details. Okay, so let's start with, I'll just take some screenshots from this one. So you saying you having some problems with anatomy? What are the areas specifically that kind of makes you feel like that the anatomy is off, or like which bits are frustrating? Okay. So I'll start with the upper leg. I think there's a mix of sort of muscle masses. So a big muscle doesn't usually necessarily mean that it's like extending out super far. I know when you have bodybuilders, and especially if like they're standing up straight, the quad is usually quite contracted. So I basically make this less round and try and go for something like a little bit more square, and then put more sort of like around the bottoms, and he'll still have that like musculature look, but it won't have all this kind of like mass and silhouette. That's probably what's throwing it off. Like if you look at it from a distance, the thing that's probably annoying you is that if we look at this area, like the glute and then the size of the quad, and then if you look at it from a distance, they're just out of proportion. So with such a big quad here, you'd expect like a massive sort of, almost like an animal, like a bear or something. But here what we've got is something that's quite small. So it could be just the proportions. So this sort of like glute is very human and it's like very tiny, whereas this is like quite large. And then that could be throwing itself onto like these areas as well. Let's make this bigger. So with the lat, you've got a lot of mass, but not only have you got a lot of mass, it actually cuts itself off down here. And then we've got quite a sharp angle. It's almost like a 90-degree angle. Can you see how that's sort of forming there? So yeah, you might be going for the V taper. So you can still get that. I would just don't be worried to sort of like fill that in and make it less prominent. He doesn't need such a small waist in comparison. But yeah, it will just be the size of this trunk here. Can you see how there's like a bit of an inner cylinder we're working with, and then a smaller cylinder in here? And it's just that this muscle is much bigger in comparison to anything that's connected on top of the others. So it's just those, to be honest. And it could be as well like the biceps might be a little bit big in comparison as well. So yeah, maybe the thing about muscly characters, which can be frustrating, is like when you want to make them muscly, usually people magnify it. So like they get like a magnifier brush, and the more clay you sort of add, the wider this starts to come out, and then all this starts to fall outwards. You can get that muscliness through all the striations you've done. So like a good example of where you've done that is basically like on the deltoid there. So he looks muscly, but it's not taking up a lot of space, if that makes sense. Whereas this is taking up a lot of space. So I think, yeah, if you just tone these down a little bit, I think it'd be more accurate. Sometimes it's hard to see when there's so much detail on the top of it as well, So it might be interesting to see a blank version. But yeah, anatomy can be quite frustrating. I'd say save out a couple of versions, and if something's frustrating you, so say the back is frustrating you and you don't really know why, it's a really good idea just to make a layer or make another object and then just flatten this out and smooth it all out, and then just try it again and see which one you prefer. Sometimes you'll find that the fastest one is the one that looks the best, and the one that you've spent the most time on is the one that is like annoying. So I did be interested to see. I definitely wouldn't throw it away because it's worth tackling, because that's going to happen a lot, and it's all about sort of like breaking through that wall. So you've sort of hit this area with anatomy, which is very, very common, and now you've just got to work out how you can just like smash through this. But those are a couple of my tips for it as well. The weighting's good that I can see from the side and stuff in terms of the position and the pose. Very cool. Yeah, my pleasure as always. Keep up the good work there. Okay, so is anyone in the chat who would like some feedback straight away? Let's just double check there's people in here. Okay, cool, awesome. Let's check it out. Yeah, welcome to the group as well. Yes. Yeah, sorry the videos didn't work. I don't know what was up with that. That's I just uploaded them. Try the next ones. Cool, got this one ready. Ah, yes. So what were you sort of going for here? What was the end target? Is it to be in Games Engine? And okay, cool. So okay. So the thing that's probably annoying you with the color, do you happen to be using a base mesh, sort of like sorry, not base mesh, base material? So the thing is, like the collar, this thing. I thought you said color. No, that's totally fine. We might as well mention it anyway, but like if you guys are painting in ZBrush, I suggest changing the material to a skin shader. So a skin shader pure white, and that means that whenever you put any form of color on here, I know that's not what you said, but this is interesting anyway. So before you paint it, put it to skin shader. It's like a flat white canvas, because if you use anything else, it slightly changes the color. So like basic material like classically makes it very dull and grey. So when you do move on to that, just make sure you use a skin shader. Okay, so the collar. Yeah, this would be an interesting one. So is it going to be made out of straw? With these concepts, it's hard to see specifically what this is. Okay. And would this be the first attempt at making something like this? Okay, so would you like some advice on the sort of workflow and like how I'd approach it, or would it be specifically for this? Okay. What's that question? Okay, I can help you out sort of and tell you how I would approach it. Yeah, does that sound good? So I think one of the challenges that you'll find is that when you come to start to bake this, because you can see how there's loads of individual details there, sort of how the straw has been weaved into each other, and then you've got a very high detailed like grass in line, how it's all bound together. So when I'm looking at this, to make this super high quality, I would basically suggest approaching many different cards, almost like hair cards. So for example, can you see how you've got these individual straw strands? They're replicated so many times that you might as well, off to the side, make the equivalent of hair cards. And then you can actually construct this as a low poly. And it would be the same for this area here. So you can see this massive band. What I would probably do, it's kind of like the standard for in-game, it's more advanced. So if this is super confusing for you, I wouldn't approach it to start with. I would just bake something normal. But it's interesting to know like the full workflow for it. What we would have is a very slim piece of UV, and then on top of this, you'd have your high quality sort of like detailing. So that could be made in like ZBrush or anything like that. And then because that's got such a high resolution, we would just repeat it over and over again like this. Whereas, and that's going to be a good tactic because there's such high detail in here. But if you did this on a normal UV layout, you just wouldn't have enough texture resolution. It would sort of be like this. If you imagine you had that there. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's how I basically approach it. For these areas, I would bake it because there's loads of interaction. There's, like it's all tied up into each other, almost like a knot. So I'd bake that separately as an individual piece right there. But yeah, and also the benefit is, can you see from the side how we can almost like see underneath the geometry? And it has the effect of this is that we can see the gaps, and it's kind of like, so if we look at it from the side, some of them are like that, some of them are coming out a little bit, some of them are going under. Now, if you had all these cards like that, it would look really cool. It would look nice and high fidelity. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you can definitely, just get some geometry, and then this will all bake really nicely. So all the knots and all the cards and stuff. The only difference is where the quality will suffer a little bit is just when it's viewed from the side, and it will look a little bit flat. Whereas this would get you some extra quality. But yeah, I'd be interested to do some technicals. So, start with the bake, and then maybe just use this tactic as a little side technical challenge. And if it works, then you can move on to the main piece. But yeah, would you like some feedback on the rest of it? Okay. So I think the first thing I saw, I like the face how it is here. So it's nicely, it's rounded, so it's giving that kiddie look. Like especially around the front is so, I don't know what age you're going for, but it kind of feels like maybe like 9, yeah, so 9 or 10. The only thing is around the side, it's starting to look a little bit older, and that's just because there's a bit too much detail. You want to soften this up and make it a bit more baby fat. Can you see how this edge is quite sharp? And the same here. So from the side, they look a little bit older. So I'll just sort of like soften that up. That would be my suggestion. It would make it more kid-like. Yeah, that could be it. Or it could be that the lips are coming out a little bit too much in the form of a pout, and the lip line might be a bit sharp. So it's kind of like this. Whereas I think if you just changed it slightly so it was a bit more like softer and relaxed, then it's going to give that kind of like innocent child sort of vibe. So it's a good reference. You can see how like it's very rounded, isn't it? It's kind of soft as well. Cool. Yeah, I like the concept. I've done similar grasses and feathers and all that sort of stuff. So it'd be quite fun. Yeah. So are these feathers or are they hay pieces? Okay. Yeah, that'll be a nice introduction to hair, because you're just like baking a normal flat piece with an alpha, basically. In fact, I'll probably share with you a project that I've done, which is pretty much the same. It's kind of like a mixture of fur, hay, twigs, all combined into one. All right. So guys, like if there's any, yeah, my pleasure. So if you guys also have like feedback for each other, that's totally cool. You know, just pipe up. It's not all about me talking, because like you guys have voice access and everything. I don't mind. Now, would anyone like to go next? Okay, have a look. Okay. So the first one was in Marmoset. I think, yeah, it was a good decision coming into Unreal Engine. I think this is looking better already. Like you can see it's a bit more physical, whereas Marmoset usually seems to dither it away and it kind of gets a bit dusty. So did you manage to paint on the undersurface like some hair strands on the texture itself, like the skin texture? Yep. You can also share screen as well. If anyone wants to show some stuff, I can come onto the actual Discord channel. So yeah, I think what I see here is the blending from the skin to the hair is quite fine here. You can see it really clearly. So what I'd expect is just to like cut into this in and out, just zigzag it a little bit more. That will make it much more natural, because from a distance we can see that it's basically like CG because of that. And the next area I see is like, because you've got the start point of the hair here and then it ends here, and it's basically one continuous sheet, and it's very obvious. Whereas on this one, can you see how it's kind of hard to find them? So I would just add some additional layers. Yeah, there's more variety, and also it's hard to complete a line. So for example, like if we draw a line here, another piece of hair comes underneath and then cuts it off. And then, you know, this line here is being cut off by another piece of hair. So in general, you just want to overlap it loads. So the problem here is that we just all have it in one direction, and the same here as well. So yeah, I'd make some smaller strands basically. And it could be as well that because you've got, let's say, the textures here, and you've got sort of like hair cards that go down there. I think, I think one of the problems is that this hair card is repeated so many times, like you can see where it is. So you want to switch up the size of it basically, because we can see like the same sort of repetition. So when you combine the different layers that you'll add on top, and then also just mix up the distance, remember it's totally okay to basically like, so you've got your hair card here, and what you can do is just get the geometry and cut it off here, get rid of that, and then just move this upwards, and then you're going to have like a much more natural sort of like staggered stage look to it. And then also at the same time, if you do have the option, can you see how this like towards the end clumps together like a little bit more? So what you could do with the hair cards, so for example, we've got like another hair card here. I would just scale this down. So it's totally okay to get all the vertices and make it actually physically smaller. So that's going to give you loads of variance. And then once you've made those smaller, maybe they can just blend into each other. So like one hair card will be like this, and then the second hair card's going to basically finish in the same direction, but it's going to end at the same point there. So I think that's going to be good. So the first thing to do is just do the blending into the hairline. I'd then sort out the kind of like additional layers, and then get rid of the hair being all the same size, just to give it variance. And then the fourth one is just to do your clumping. And so once you've done all those four, I think it's going to be much closer to this one. And also, don't be afraid to add a little bit more geometry and have it like curl. Can you see how towards the end the cards start to turn a bit more? So it could be on your cards here. You could just get more vertices and then start to make them go off like this. Does that make sense? Do you want any more feedback for anything else, or shall I use this one, or just wait for a new photo? Is this the one? Oh, okay. Yeah. So how are you trying to match it very close, or you going for this likeness? Yeah, we can take some notes from this. It'd be awesome if I had a sculpt I could like sort of like work on it, but I'll try and describe it as we are now. So I'll do my best in this. So I think the area that could make the biggest improvement to what you have now is basically the area in between the cheek and the mouth. So if we take a look at this concept and look at the shadows, there's an invisible line that's basically around here, and you can see how it's basically dipping in slightly. So it kind of goes like this. I'll try and draw like the sections over here. So this is the sort of mass that's here, and then you've got like a second mass that comes up this way, right? So that's missing a little bit on this one. So what I would do is get like a dam standard and go quite harshly sort of in this direction, and then you'd also go quite harshly here as well, and then you would bulk up the cheek and the area, and so that will get it a little bit closer to what she looks like. And then you'd also do the same with the lip. So that basically means that if we move this away, can you see the difference, how it's quite flat there, and in comparison it would be a lot bulkier? Okay, so yeah, I think that's going to make a big difference. So the other one is if we look at the eye. So the eyeball is a similar size to how you have it here, but the only difference is that the surrounding bone and structure is just a little bit more open. So if we were to look at, say, this is the eyeball from the side, all of this is quite open like this, and it's kind of like giving the eye, imagine that the eye has like room to breathe and like be open, whereas here it's a little bit more closed. So for example, like we've got the eye there, and we've got the other parts that are just a bit like this, so it's a bit more, everything's a bit more enclosed around the eye, and that's what gives the illusion of big eyes versus small eyes. So maybe that's something you had a little bit of trouble with. So this kind of like goes outwards, this goes outwards as well. You want to find that in your eyeball just to get more space, basically. I think that'll be another improvement. The other one is a little bit harder to describe, but I'll try and do it anyway. So the lip here, if we were going to look at it from the top, it basically feels, I'd have to double check it, but it feels like it's quite flat. Whereas if we were going to look at the lips from here, from the top, it's a bit more curved. So oh yeah, we can see it here. So it depends if you want to get it close to here. So she's got quite a small set of teeth. So if we're going to draw something beneath it, it's kind of got like this sort of shape, right? That's funny. So what you'd have is basically this corner of the mouth can either come backwards a little bit just to support this smaller cylinder inside, or instead of putting it back, you can have it come down just a tiny bit. It's annoying because I can't see it at the same time. There we go. It's almost like the way I usually like to imagine it is like, say we had a sphere, like whenever you're, actually I could do this here. So it's kind of the difference between sculpting lips on a sphere versus a flat plane. So if I duplicate this, yeah, so I mean, kind of the vibe I'm getting from there is that because it starts on a flat surface like that, so when you're creating the lip, for example, from the front it's going to look very similar, but it's going to have a generic sort of like flatness to it. Whereas if you start from a sphere like this, it's going to have a bit more wraparound, which is going to be a nice feature for that. So yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, this is a difficult one because it could be also that this is too sharp, if that makes sense. So because we're working on there's a primary form, and then there's the secondary form, and then there's also the lip form, right? So, you know, if those are your lips, this is going to look very funny. Okay, so if that's the kind of like the jaw structure, even if you did have something that was quite flat like this, it would look very similar. So it does have the angle. It's very hard to describe, but it's basically that it's things in proportion to each other. So for example, like if this jaw wasn't as sharp, like it was a little bit more rounded, then suddenly this looks more spherical, if that makes sense. So it's just like measuring the two together. Look at this funny thing. Hopefully I'm getting across that concept, because there's so many different levels of shape that are going on here. You know, you've got quite a tapered chin, And then on top of that, you've got another secondary subshape, which is with hers, it's almost like a cylinder. And then on top of that, you've then got the small curve on the lip. Cool, yeah. See how the hair goes on. And then maybe at a later date, if you send me the file, we can sort of have a play around with this. Because otherwise I have to make funny clam concepts like that. And it doesn't get across well. But if I could actually sculpt on it, then I'd be able to show it. But yeah, that's coming across cool. Yeah. Nice to see you progressing with the hair as well. Okay, so is anyone else here who would like some feedback? Rishabh. Oh yeah, I've saved this one out. Let's have a look. Yeah, so what sort of style were you going for target-wise? It in engine, or are you trying to match this concept quite accurately? Oh, are these the actual in-game shots? Oh, is this from your game or? Okay, cool. Yeah, so you're at the stage of basically like doing somewhat of a muddy-ish concept, I guess. Yeah, I'll try and look at proportions and stuff, because any feedback that I would just be like to polish, like to polish it up, but probably not at that stage yet. Yeah, I think it looks cool. I think from the side, it's losing a little bit of the feminine aspect. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the shape of like Tom Cruise from the side. So it depends what you're going for, really. Is it like a younger female character, or yeah? So I'd take a little bit of squareness out of the jaw, and then maybe make the angles of the neck sort of like a little bit more subtle, because his is looking quite strong in comparison. And then if you're going for this kind of style of concept, her nose is a lot smaller in comparison to everything else. So it's hard without a side shot, but I assume it's kind of got like a bit more of a sharper angle like that, instead of like a larger nose. Be good. Okay, awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my next suggestion, is just have a female face. Yeah, hers will be similar from the side. Obviously, the nose is quite matching. So from the side on this one, I would just take a little bit of the bulk out of the tip, and then also the sides of the nose, and maybe even make it like a little bit smaller in comparison. With hers, she's got more of kind of like an underbite, and that's why her jaw is coming out like this way. It's kind of like giving a bigger illusion to it. Go around. In terms of the back end, I think this could do with a little bit more mass. So if you were to look at it from behind, it's kind of like popping out a bit more. So I'll try and get a screenshot from this one. So the shape is there from the back, but can you see how there's like additional parts that are basically popping out? It's having like quite a 3D effect. So it'd be nice to see if you concept those in straight away. Like especially this section, that seems to be coming out like quite an extrusion like that. So I'd like to see that's basically over here. Yeah, in terms of proportions, I think like if we were to match, if I take her whole body, so take her from here, a couple of matches you could do. Again, it depends how close you want to get it, but if you're trying to get the similar like language that's going on, we can improve the kind of overall shapes of the cut. So here, for example, there's like the upside down funnel, and she's got a very heroic X shape. You could try and introduce that a little bit more into here, because right now it's coming quite wide in comparison. And then if you look at the equipment on top of that, so can you see sort of like this muscle and this sort of like scapular area? On hers, it's very pinched and contained. It's like very small, and that's what gives her like a smaller torso feeling. Whereas like all the scapula and the muscles here are quite large. So I hope that comes across. So if you imagine like her shoulder blade, the muscle on top, and the trap that comes up, it's very small in comparison to this one. So I'll just reduce the size there. It could be also that this is dropping a little bit, like the pelvis region. So this is kind of like a more squared out pelvis, whereas hers is, I know she's got her legs open, but she still does have quite like an upside down funneled pelvis, which is like usually what you see in females. So yeah, just a couple of proportions changes there, really. I think the leg's good. Like that's looking quite good in comparison. Could be that there's a little bit of bulk being lost on the calves there, and then I'd like to see this element just a little bit bigger, because it's getting lost. It's a little bit small in comparison. But yeah, cool. It's always a difficult one, especially when you're at the sort of like concepting stage. And in the industry, we basically like copy the reference perfectly and identically. But then sometimes when people are studying, like they don't want to follow it 100%. But I suggest like trying to get it as close as possible, because that's all you're going to really do. And if you are making the changes, is it that you want the body frame to be very similar to this one here, like this concept, or are you interpreting it a different way? Okay, so similar vibe, right? Yeah, those are always difficult because you're changing the concepts out. The only thing I can say about this one is she's very athletic. Like she does have sort of like a tight body and stuff, whereas this is more like a standardized female body. You wouldn't see it as like an athletic type, if that makes sense. So if you're just trying to transfer the vibe, I feel like she just needs to be a bit stronger. Whereas here she looks a bit like a skinny girl in a wetsuit, that sort of look. Whereas this one's quite strong and heroic, you know? Yeah, cool. Interested to see how this one comes off. Okay, so do we have anyone else who would like some feedback? If not, we could do some portfolio reviews, or if anyone wants to share their screen, we can take advantage of that technology. Okay, so we've got some feedback for Amy. Yeah, we can do Yaman. Is he here today? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do Yaman's. Amy's? Yaman's. Okay, Amy, yes, similar questions. So what are you aiming for, and is there anything that you specifically want feedback for? Otherwise, I can make it nice and generic. Okay, cool. Let's have a look. Yeah, so I mean, so it's nice that you've taken it through the entire workflow and it's like presented, posed. I like this effect. Sometimes, is this in Unreal Engine? So what you can do when it comes to the presentation, we'll start a presentation and work backwards. So you can put an individual light here, and then that's going to add to the effect of the emissive, because the emissive isn't going to be enough to emit light onto these sections. And then when you do have a physical light there, it interacts with the reflectivity captures, and it just makes it look way better. So yeah, I suggest doing sort of like a supporting light there. In terms of the realism, the thing that might be taking it away from the realistic side is the skin texture surface. So right now when I look at it, it's coming across a bit plastic, and that's usually because of the highlight and the lack of texture on the surface of the skin. So it could be that you go back to the sculpt and then just put a couple more pores in, and then because you put more surface detail in, it's going to break up this specularity, and then because you've broken up that specularity, it then doesn't look like a bit plastic, if that makes sense. So usually what happens is the light comes in and perfectly reflects off, and then it gives that illusion of like a toy. But yeah, so if you come in and just sort of like stagger that up with some pores, that's gonna help the effect. Also at the same time, put a bit more color in on the skin itself, and then that's going to add to the realism. So for example, around the eye, you'd usually have a slightly different tone than you would have to the cheek, and then also to the neck and stuff. So go on top and basically like put some additional colors in. Usually the classic one is people aim for like a blue shade or like a blue hue around here, and then there's a slight yellow hue around areas of bone, because the skin is like very thin, there's not too much blood there. And then when it comes to the eyes, just like an overlay of like red, also around the nose and the lips. That's because there's loads of blood flow there and the skin is really thin. So I think if you had to sort of like surface texturing there and also mix up the colors, it's going to add to the realism. And definitely transfer that all over to the body. I know it's like a lot of surface area to paint in, but you can make use of things like procedurals and just layer it up gradually, like one layer at a time. Maybe there's skin imperfections, like there's some freckles, or if they in the past, whenever someone has like a scar or a dot or a spot, that slowly fades over the months, but the ghost of it is still there, like the history of it is still there. So there's loads of skin detailing, texturing that you can insert into this, which are really cool. In terms of the materials here as well, could be that the roughness is a little bit high. I'm not too sure what the material is. It's coming across a bit like a porcelain, like almost like a vase. So if it was a leathery shoe, you just want to have a bit more detail and folds, and similar to like the face that you'd have, just some more like sculpted information. Because right now it's looking a bit cast, if that makes sense. I'll just double check it. So it's to be leather. Yeah, so with leather, what you can do, so say for example, this can be our leather. Do you have any references that you're following or anything like that? Those can be a big help. So I think the first thing that's missing on the leather is basically the macro. So starting quite large. Usually a good one for this, like a little tactic I've shown before, is that if you start with a standard brush, doesn't have to be anything fancy, and then do a couple of lines, so 1, 2, and then just below it you're going to do an additional one, and you can see how it creates this like 5-sided dice. And then after that, you can connect them all together with one standard brush. So again, I'm keeping it really simple here, just like, one simple line that goes across there. So I think if you start with that and blend it back in. So usually what I do is instead of smoothing it, because when you smooth it, can you see how it all vanishes? try your best with something like a clay brush just to fill in those areas to make it blend into each other nicely. So from a distance, you can sort of do very minor clay brushes. And you can see how it's starting to sort of like flow a little bit better. And then you do strategic softening like this and smoothing. So I think if you do that, it's going to look a lot better already. And then afterwards, you just do the same process, but on a finer detail. So then you just go over it back over again. And then slowly what happens is the leather starts to appear. So if you were doing this as well, definitely have your reference to the side. So I'm cheating a bit because it's just that I've done a lot of leather before. So I just remember what what it feels like to start sculpting it. But definitely have like a reference to the side. And I will also use a reference, just to make sure that I'm purposely matching it, and then try and copy what you see and interpret the sharpness and things like that. So the next level, once you're happy with that, you can obviously go up the divisions. Now with leather, really nice one to do is get something like a dam standard. Just do some wobbles like this. Actually, let's put it in a place that makes sense. So where it's folding a lot. So treat it a little bit like, the way I like to treat it is a bit like water. So where would like river lines go and stuff like that. Like here you can see I'm being a bit too methodical and it all looks the same, so you can just like mix up a little bit, and then after that you can get the standard brush very small and just sort of go in between that. And you see we're keeping it noisy, like really noisy, and that doesn't matter. So you just follow what you already made, and then that gives the illusion of leather that has sort of like lost its surface. It's come away from the underlaying layers, if that makes sense, because it uses like a thin upper layer to leather. So yeah, I think if you introduce that into this area, everything will look better, like the roughness will look better. So usually what I find is when people observe like a shininess, where it looks like porcelain, it's usually not the material's fault, it's actually the high poly's fault. So once you've got this, and then you keep the same material, it will then suddenly start to look a bit more like leather. The other difficult thing you've got to deal with is that this is blue, and not many people see blue leather, so that could also be throwing the visuals off of leather, if that makes sense. So yeah, just sort of take time to practice leather. That's definitely an art in itself. So the other areas that I was thinking is basically the anatomy around the chest and the biceps. So if you've got some more references, go a little bit stronger just behind the biceps and also underneath the pectoral, because right now it's one smooth flow like this, almost like it's been smoothed out. So what I mean by that, if we can turn, that side's going to be leather, and then this side's going to be a pectoral. So say that's your pectoral. Usually people sort of like leave it like this, and you see how the broad softened area from the side kind of like has this faint look. Depending on like the fat, the level of the muscle, the dryness of the skin is very different. But I know with sort of like the Egyptian characters, they're usually quite slender and obviously dry there, so they're probably dehydrated, the pharaoh or whatever it is. So I would go underneath here, and then usually for an overlapping muscle like a pectoral, I will sort of soften the underside. You can make use of masking, like if you want it to really be strong, you can just protect the rib cage like under there, and then you can go over it a couple of times. That's just going to make it stronger. It's going to make the muscle look a bit more muscly. So you can see the difference that'll basically make. And then you can fade it away depending on how tough you want the skin to be. So when it comes to the center, like around the sternum where it's connected to bone, you usually have a lot of kind of like muscle attachment. So the muscle attachment is going to be sort of like this. And then the further away you get up into the arm, can you see how that starts to open up? So you can open it up by just softening and then brushing in that direction. And then you've got a different transition. Like, so it's all transition of form is the next level of studying, basically like sculpting. And I think once you start to practice that here, that's going to have like a really cool effect. So just sort of like that. I would say the back of the tricep could do a little bit of work. It might be that you've got quite a lot of resolution here, so you might be finding it hard to flatten and make the surfaces soft. So say for example, we want to get rid of something and make it a little bit softer. I can do that here, but if I had too much resolution, let's say here, you can see that when I soften it, it's much harder to work with. So maybe go back a division or two and just make this like a smooth transition basically. And I think one thing that could improve the arm is how the deltoid, so the shoulder muscles, is flowing into the upper arm. So the shape I can see here is basically this, whereas instead what you want is something that's a bit more teardropped. So think of it like, chicken breasts that you would eat. So it's basically chicken breasts that come down into, and they converge sort of in this direction. Everyone's slightly different, but if you had that sort of better flow that went down, that would increase the visuals of the arm. So right now you can already see where the shelf is. You've got quite a hard cut there. So you just want to blend this all back into itself. And with the arm, you see how we've got like quite a big mass here. The brachialis is more specifically. But with most people, you can't actually see that. It's usually quite flat. So this muscle here, the brachialis that I just drew, you won't actually really be able to see that from the front. That's going to be hidden. That's going to be nice and flat and squared. And then the deltoid comes and wraps over like that. So that's a common anatomical mistake I see most people make. And we can continue with loads of these. So, for example, you've obviously on the characters, the bicep, the central chest, the neck, and the side ribs. So you might as well spend quite a lot of time on this area. So I think what I'd like to see with yours is just bringing out the rib indication of the rib cage a bit more, and then having the other muscles like the obliques on top of it. So once you've got that, just rub this out. It's going to get rid of this this flat look. Can you see how it just goes all the way down and it's very smooth? Whereas the body is just very bumpy, lumpy, and got, fat deposits and all that sort of stuff. So just breaking that up a little bit, I think will make an improvement. And then with, check if you've got any comments. And then with the cloth, so I still remember going through cloth. So one of my first characters had a very similar setup to yours. And I remember how frustrating it was, sort of like spending so much time on making these striations. And then I didn't look how it looked. I didn't like how it looked once I finished. So with yours, what I'd suggest doing is just removing a couple of these areas. And remember, when it comes to cloth, you don't necessarily have to put more. Sometimes less cloth is better. So if I sort of duplicate this, get rid of our lovely pectoral and leather like that. So yeah, sometimes it can be a bit tempting to, when you're drawing the cloth, is to sort of like make all these lines, right? And it sort of zigzags back and forth. And that will be a very specific type of cloth. The problem is here is when you're up and close and then you zoom out and you suddenly realize that you've done that all over the place, that can be a problem sometimes. So what I would do is just pick and choose very specific places where that's going to happen. So with this, for example, maybe there's one that's here, maybe there's one sort of here, and then one here, and then that's going to be enough. And then just let the blending do the rest of the work. You don't need additional ones here, and here. And then use what you've already got to like build it up, and maybe it opens up a bit more into the back, and then you can soften that up. So sometimes with cloth, definitely less is more, and then you can just put sort of like micro indications in between the pendant, or just fix it up with a dam standard. So again, yeah, it depends on your reference. If I saw some references, I could definitely be a bit more accurate with that. I like what you've done here. So there's good strategies. In terms of other realism, you've picked quite a hard one. So gold is really difficult in games and real time. So it all depends on the reflectance of like what's in the environment. So this might be a bit too advanced, but like I suggest when you come into your Unreal Engine, you put some other objects around the scene, or you look into reflectance capture volumes, and that will make your gold look much better. And the reason gold is difficult as well is because it looks different in Substance than it does in Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is very shader dependent, whereas Substance, I don't know how they deal with theirs, but it doesn't look the same at all. How's that, Emmy? Is there any other bits? Interested to see your updates. Obviously, we can do more later down the line. That's a good start with what you've got here. So skin detailing, a little bit of anatomy, and then definitely some leather practice. That would be really good. Okay, last but not least, we have Yaman. Probably Yaman's 8th character, is it? So you've done really well here. The areas of feedback that I was looking at is just basically the matching of the concept first. I think the first is the scaling of 3 main areas. So it's first the head, the basic like the torso area and the feet. A lot of this has been mismatched. So she's got very large feet, oddly enough. So if we look at that in comparison to the head, her head is actually quite small. So if you want to get a bit more accurate to this reference, just look at those 3 main areas and try and reproportion it. But in terms of everything else, I think it's got a good height, as in everything's got a good distance from each other. It's just the volumes that need to be adjusted slightly. And it's the same with these triangular pieces. Hers on your sculpt, it's quite small and dainty, whereas on this one it's actually quite large. It's sort of like taking up a lot of area. So it could be just the thickness of these cylinders, or maybe even the thickness of her hands. You can see how this is quite small, whereas on the concept they're quite large and angled and sharp. So really get in here and start, you can see it side by side, really start to try and interpret the character of this hand onto that. Usually people like bypass the hand. In terms of the face, so the face can be another one, a hard one to describe just by like with words. I think the primary thing is basically that the facial features themselves are actually a bit large, whereas on here they're a lot smaller. So just compare the shape and size of her head to the size of, say, for example, like her mouth. And what you'll probably find is that your mouth, nose, and eyes are just a little bit bigger in comparison to this one. So try and shrink them down. It will look really weird to start with because you're going to be shrinking like a facial feature, but give it time. So once you've made the lips smaller, the eyes smaller, you'll basically have to put some effort into blending it. So that's usually a trap people fall down into, is they make it first and then they reduce the size of the facial features and then it doesn't look right. Just give it some time to blend it back in to make it smaller. But that's just the concept mismatch slightly. What you'd also like to see, I probably haven't finished all the hair yet, but obviously with her hair it's quite voluminous and it's coming out quite far. I would just replicate that and just like bring it all the way out. But yeah, I like where this is going. The other thing with the metal that you might be slipping into a little bit is the thickness and this kind of like stylized weightiness of it. So with this gear, not only is it quite thick, but it also varies in thickness as it goes along. So on this side it's quite large, and then in here it's quite thin. So that gives some visual interest, right? So you just want to make sure you observe that and introduce it onto your own ones. The last thing you want to do is just do like, can you see here? This is the one we're talking about. The last thing you want to do is just do a standard extrusion, you know? So because this is stylized, there's no such thing as extrusion. There's only really about like giving thickness, and then you can play around with the thickness, you know, make it small or larger in different areas, and that's where the style comes out. Just try not to have it all the same thin metal size, basically. You'll see with the amulet as well, like if I look at this amulet and if I was going to draw this in 2D, there's a lot of bulky elements that are on top of each other. So you've got the base, and then you've kind of got like this another really large bevel that's popping out of it, and then again even the stone is like really out there. So you want to make those observations and then transfer it over to yours, because here it's the amulet's really big, but then the underlying components are quite flat and thin. So we're stylized, think bulky, thick, and broad like that. That's my sort of best advice for that. The other area that I saw was the cloth. So I think the stylized cloth here, it does look quite natural, like it's falling on top of the armor, whereas on your sculpt it seems that it's floating a little bit. So I'm not too sure what it's resting on. So maybe just try and identically match the cloth here, or just bring this down so it's resting on top of the golden armor. I think that'll make a big difference there. And then final is similar topic to like what I was talking about with the shoulder blades, is basically the observing the thickness of like trim and the thickness and size and proportion of other stuff. So on here it's quite large, but on this 3D it gets a little bit thin towards the side and just throwing off a little bit. This area is nice and thick, but here's quite thin. Just double check. This will be super pedantic, but try and observe the sort of length of these elements. So this asset here is quite short and stubby, and you can see it's almost like resting on top of her hip line, whereas on the 3D asset here it goes quite high and it's also quite long. So just shrinking and budging around a couple of things just so it matches the concept a little bit more. Because what this has done, if I'm going to draw on top of this, I'm feeling this kind of shape, and it's got a bit more of a pill form like this. Whereas with here, it's more of a bell shape and it's finishing here, if that makes sense. So we want to see a little bit more wrapping with these sides. Could be one of the difficult things is because this 2D concept has been made in a pose, her armor is curved. So her armor looks like this. got a curved shape to her, and that's matching her thighs. But on yours, it's a little bit more flat, and that's because her legs are straight, you know, and they're not going inwards. So you might want to make this curved first, so actually sculpt it curved, and then when it comes to the pose, you can actually just then rotate this inwards, and that'll be nice. So yeah, lots of content there. Cool. I like how you've laid this out as well. Nice and neat. Okay, guys. So unless there's anyone else, I think we'll call it. I think that's pretty much everyone covered that is in the session. Blue Elf, Retopo. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I love to see retopology. Very good, very good, very good. Yeah, so overall, the topology is good. I would say, yeah, you've got all the loops up there I can see. Yeah. So potentially, when it gets to the collarbone and this region, the flow of the geometry is getting a little bit lost. So for example, we've got edge direction that goes here, and then we've got edge flow that goes this way, and then edge flow that goes that way. So that's okay, because if you've been trying to pick up the muscles themselves, that's sometimes useful. But for practicality, and when it comes into the games engine, we really just want to keep this nice and grid shaped like this. And if there's any additional pieces of sort of like striation, we can actually insert that afterwards. But yeah, definitely with the neck, because it twists, bends and deforms. Like if you imagine it part of the body, it's actually one of the things that is just so dynamic. We want to avoid any poles that don't need to be there. So sort of like this, and definitely these areas, and any triangles, to be honest, as well. We just want to keep them away from that. So I would maybe work out a way to basically like fix those. I think where you terminate these into triangles, you could actually just have them continue all the way to the center. It basically feels that the chest needs that much geometry anyway, so you might as well not do it. And again, whenever there's like an area of high deformation, try not to have too many triangles, because it'll be a lot better. So when it comes to animation, when this goes upwards like this, the geometry under here is going to cause quite a bit of problems, because this is quite a small quad. It's going to be stretched out quite long. So ideally what you want is loops, many loops that go like this. Can you see how it creates like a bendy straw effect? And then that's gonna help out. So funnily enough, the videos that are coming to you next for you Progress guys is like covers this topic, which is quite nice, and also clothing. And then I'm also aligning it to releasing like a retopology course. So I forgot to mention to you guys, actually, there's I've set up like a registration page. So if you want to get on top of, I'm going to release it next to nothing, basically. So if you guys want to be on that, you'll get the biggest discount ever. But it's basically like a retopology course that covers all this sort of stuff. But for yours right now, yeah, definitely, if you're putting this on portfolio, especially for games, I would put some additional loops inside of that. Same with the thumb. It's kind of a difficult one to do. I would aim for loops along the knuckle base and on the outside of the knuckle, and try avoid as many triangles as possible. The density is good here. The only thing you would want in addition is, again, wherever there's like a knuckle, just put some extra loops so they can bend. So here, and then the other one there. Now, if you wanted to make this like the best topology, I would try and can you see how the edges go like this? And then there's one that's sort of like here, and then this one loops down like that. What I suggest doing is try and look at the overall shape of that torso, and then aim for something that's very straight and flat. So again, that's going to help with twisting and deforming animation. So turn these ones into flat sections, and then this will deform much nicer. But yeah, I think just a couple of poles and triangles have slipped in where they might cause issues, and that's quite difficult to fix, because it needs like a broader approach. So sometimes it's harder to fix up the geometry than it is to basically like start to get on that area. But this is ready. This can go into engine completely fine. The gear is quite good, yeah. So I like what you've done with the corners there. You've turned those into tries. You definitely have them there. Just the areas of deformation is the hard one to get with retopology. Whereas static object, you can just put sort of any sort of geometry really. But until it deforms, that's where it causes the most issues. All right, guys. So tell me that people are still with me. I haven't heard anything in a while, but unless there's anyone finished up with more works in progress, I think we'll call it there. And thanks for turning up. Really good work in that month. Everyone's progressing so fast. It's great to see. It's really nice, and it's nice to see people are sticking to projects, and the completion rate's getting quite good. So yeah, keep it up. Remain active in helping others in the forums. I always see you guys giving really good advice, actually. Like, it's nice to watch and absorb myself, to be honest. All right. Bye-bye, guys. And yeah, my pleasure, as always. I can have a quick look. I've basically got to get off soon, but yeah, we can have a quick look. Okay, so tell me a bit about what you're aiming for and what the sort of like ambition is, how far you've got so far. Hello? Oh, I don't know if you were talking, it was cutting out potentially. I heard you were studying for 2 years. Whoops. So I think there's technical problems, but I'll just get into it anyway. Yeah, so I mean, for 2 years, this looks really cool. It's nice to see you've done, got like everything into Unreal Engine. I can see you've done hair cards, which is nice. And there's some sculpted and meta elements. I'll go into each one. Is this sort of like a progression? The left is the latest and the right is the oldest? Cool. I've been watching Shogun. Yeah, I think the face has got like a realistic vibe to it. Maybe the armor in areas coming across a bit like plasticky, like you would see. Kind of reminds me of the lacquer of floor, like you would see like in a hospital or something. So it's not giving me the metal vibe. So on this character, I would try and bring out the metalness a little bit more. And in terms of the leather, it might be worth bringing a little bit more shine here, because it's coming off a bit like suede, like a very soft, fresh look. But maybe that's what you're going for, like it's a fresh, clean character. So yeah, just depends on the grittiness, really. On these ones, I'd say tone down the special effects a little bit, because what it's doing is it's drawing away from the main character. So the character's quite textured by itself, so it doesn't need the support of like additional noise, if that makes sense. So that being said, you could even just reduce it slightly, just to let areas rest a bit more, because there's so much equipment, and then there's the inner textures, and then the grunginess of the texture itself, that there's quite a lot of like sharpness going on. So I suggest doing that. Maybe change the color of the background as well, because it's getting lost, or make the introduction of some rim lights. So we posted some videos about lighting, and on that we go over some rim light techniques, and that's what you truly want, is to separate from the background. Yeah, it should be. I'll check after this. It sounds like Vimeo or Patreon's doing something, so I'll have to have a look at that. Cool, yes, there's nice work. So just double check your metalness values, because you either want them basically 1 or 0. Mid values basically don't present like the correct PBR. So you did some X-Gen hair. It's quite good. It's good X-Gen character hair. Did you generate them the strands yourself? Very good. I think you might be breaking up quite a lot. But yeah, in terms of portfolio view, there might be quite a lot of screenshots. I'd definitely put your best ones at the top. And then when it comes to job interviews and stuff, we'll basically be investigating quite a lot, like how you made it. So what sort of texture maps you used? Did you use any like MetaHuman or XYZ and stuff? So be prepared to get that done. I'd really like to see some examples of like X-Gen layouts and stuff, because that's going to be really important. So how you made the guides, just sort of like behind the screen screenshots of that's going to be very useful. Mm-hmm. This is cool. I think the camera is a bit unsmooth, like it's been thrown around a lot. So just double check the curves in the animation, because sometimes when you keyframe things, they will interpolate and blend. So it gives this kind of like wobbly throw around effect. So maybe just slow it down and then change the animation curves. Depends if you've got a sequence on the go there. Sequences are usually quite good for that. That's what I was thinking. Here we go. We've got some more guides and stuff. So with these guides, are you basically generating the hair? Are these hair cards, or are you actually generating the hair and then putting it into Unreal Engine? Okay, so it's kind of real time, I guess. Cool. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of feedback, to be honest, these are so big on my screen right now. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I think just a bit of lighting and presentation. So what's lacking here is there's no real shadow. It's very highly lit. So you can get some mood in here, you know, like what the character is. Is there like a main light that comes and casts a shadow like down the center? And then once you've got a couple of rim lights, that's going to really accentuate the hairs and the fibers that you've already got. So I think you could push it a lot further with the lighting, basically. But yeah, I like what you've done with the textures being supported by like other cards, like on the rope and stuff. Maybe just tone it down. So on the rope here, you've got it basically everywhere, so it looks like standard. Just have it come out in places here and there. Like you wouldn't expect this to be all over the rope. Maybe it's coming out in different areas, and I suspect it would come out not at 90 degrees, but it would come out like a little bit of an angle, like it's being flayed. So maybe that can be an improvement. But it's cool technical. It's weird. Oh my god. So yeah, I think you know, you've got a good sculpting and texturing ability. I think just the thing that needs to come up is the camera work and like the overall presentation and stuff. That would basically be my review for it. But yeah, freaky character. I also see that you've got like Marmoset and Unreal Engine. Is this in Unreal Engine or? Oh, okay. Cool. You got some sculpted flyovers. Nice. Okay, so let's have a look overall. I mean, the only thing that would be missing for me is basically like advanced metal work and hard surface work. So there's a lot of skin texturing there. So I think one of my favorites is the skin detailing here, but that might be a wrap. But knowing a wrap is very useful. Like we usually look for that in people. So it's nice that you've like used that technology. Maybe in your presentation here, I know it says it 3D, like you've used the wrap, but have some behind the scenes shots of you actually like using it. Because then when we're scrolling through it, we definitely know. Yeah, really good progress for 2 years. Should be proud of that. Awesome. My pleasure. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Catch you around. Keep it up. Bye-bye.